what crime would you not commit, and what lie would you not tell to achieve paradise on earth? That's the mentality of these people. So that's the first thing that flows from it, is they're incredibly dishonest. And I think we're handing out a pamphlet that I did on.
Is this one?
No, it's the other one. It's a red. You gotta have the. It's a red pamphlet, and it's called Barack Obama's Rules for Revolution, and it's about his mentor Saul Alinsky. But that's the message of Alinsky, that any lie is justified because you're in a war to bring about paradise. And the second thing that flows from that is anybody who stands in the way of that is a monster, and you hate them. They hate you. Republicans are always, they call them a racist. The Republican is always, no, if you really know me, I'm actually a pretty good person. And it doesn't, you're a racist because you're a Republican and you oppose the policies that would liberate all minorities and make them, so, or think of it this way. In their minds, they're the army of the saints bringing about the redemption. And you are the party of Satan. That's the way they think. And if you ever wondered why they're always interrupting the conservative and won't let them finish, and why they're so angry, and how could they hate George Bush? I mean, there are many people who, give off a vibe that you could hate them, but how could you hate George Bush? But they did, and this is the reason.
So, when you think about what the Obama administration is doing, and you look at the effect that Islamofascism is having on our country, what would you characterize as being the three greatest dangers that face our country?
Before I get to that, I realized I didn't quite finish the answer to your question. They're always, remember Hillary, her husband is accused of, I'm going to blush. So what does she do? She accuses vast right-wing conspiracy. That is just a projection of what the left actually is. Most of their attacks on the right are projections of, that's the way they operate. So they think everybody operates that way. There is no right-wing conspiracy, and there's no big coordination. There's no right-wing George Soros. But there is a left-wing George Soros. And for example, George Soros, actually I described at great length in the Shadow Party. It put together a coalition that includes billionaires, includes communist street fighters, and trade unionists who are also thuggish. I don't want to insult any trade unionists here, but the SEIU and these organizations are masters of intimidation and brutality. And they have created an organization called the Center for American Progress, which is run by John Podesta, who was Clinton's chief of staff. And George Soros has gathered $50 million to fund 501c3s and 501c4s, which are tax-exempt organizations. And they have all kinds of names, like whatever. Organized for America. Campus Progress is their youth organization. So there is a coordinated apparatus. Some of it is described in the Shadow Party. All of it is described in Discover the Networks. And Glenn Beck is doing a wonderful job of explaining it to millions of people. And I don't want to, he does his own research as well. It's just that I know that the first time conservatives have connected the dots comes from somebody, I did it only because I know who these people are and I know what these organizations are. It was, I'm tremendously relieved. The second half of my life has been an atonement, and that was my atonement. But I was very frustrated when I could not just get that message out. And now it's out.
Thank God. Thank God.
I look on the dangers, the threats to America. I think there are three major areas of threat. I mean, there are obviously, we could stay here all day and talk about what the left is doing to destroy our culture and our society. But one is the war on terror. And of course, it's not a war on terror. It's a war against an Islamic holy war that has been declared on us and is being carried out by millions of Muslims. That's just a fact. And it's a fact that nobody in government can mention. Even the Bush administration couldn't mention it. But that's the reality. The minute you look at what's happening. The second area of great concern to me, of threat, is our borders. You cannot have a sovereign country without borders. The only borders in the world that are under attack from within are America's borders. The President of the United States has said, you can't define a country by its borders. What else can you define it by? And that's because of this fantasy that there's going to be a world without nations. There's not going to be a world without nations. And the third area, and this is the one that I've spent the most time on, and I'm still incredibly frustrated because I have not been able to generate a reform movement to deal with it, although Texas already is beginning, and Arizona, two frontline states. And that is our schools. You can go, this is a red state, but you can go, and Rick Perry told me this personally, every trustee of the University of Texas, which has 130,000 students, was personally appointed by him. You can go right through the University of Texas at Austin and get a degree in radical, communist, anti-American politics. You can major, I mean, that's not what they call it. Taught by Looney Tunes professors. I have to go under police guard when I go to, well, it's almost any university, but at UT, there's always a problem. And I mean a major problem. The last time I was at UT, there was this professor who's a Marxist who was leading her students, and they were, chanting all kinds of things. And so I couldn't begin speaking. And there was an official from the university, and they had to be warned and warned. They got 3 warnings. And they finally had to be told, if you don't stop, you're going to be arrested. And that's what stopped them. But the big problem is that woman teaches Marxism. She teaches Hate America courses, and they're all over the country. I've actually written 4 books about this, one called One Party Classroom. And to me, and of course it's worse in the K-12 schools. So I'm deeply concerned about this. You will not be able to retain a Republican majority in this state, or what I would say, I know Texas Democrats are somewhat better than Democrats. No? Another myth. All right, I'll take that back. I personally don't know any Texas Democrats. But you can't retain a majority if your schools are indoctrinating students in leftist claptrap. So that concerns me. Well, I've written all these books. I mean, I have this academic Bill of Rights that can start with. I think what the legislature did with, and Lois Kolkhorst, who's one of your legislators, she's doing a really great job at fighting this. But it's not really on the radar of the Republican Party.